Alright, so in this video we're going to look at how we would find an endpoint when given one of the endpoints and the midpoint. Now we are going to use this midpoint formula to figure this out, but I also want to give you a visual and show you how we can do it visually as well, because it may look a little confusing when I'm doing it here. But let me show you the way that we would do it if we were using this midpoint formula. And when I say midpoint formula, it is going to give us an ordered pair, X and Y, once we get done doing the math. So let's take a look at what we actually know. For instance, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start labeling some things. This endpoint, that's my X1 and my Y1 value. And then over here, this is my midpoint. So I'm not going to label this one X1 and Y1 because normally we would label this one over here. For instance, this would be our X2 and our Y2. The problem is we don't know what these values are. So we're going to have to work backwards using this formula to figure it out. So I'm going to rewrite this formula right here. So let me write it over here. So I'm going to go ahead, draw my parenthesis, and I'm going to put what I do know. What I do know is I have an X1 value of positive 1. So I'm going to write a 1 plus, now I don't know what X2 is, so I'm just going to put an X in place of X2. And then this is going to be over 2. And now I know what this is equal to. I know if I knew the number for X and I did this process, I know that it would be equal to 3, which is my midpoint value for X. So I'm going to put a 3 right there. So I need to solve this equation here to figure out what the endpoint is. Our other point is we're going to do the same process. We're going to look at what we know. Now we know what Y1 is. Y1 is positive 5 in this problem. So I'm going to put a positive 5 in here. And we know we got to add it to our Y2. But we don't know what Y2 is. And when we don't know what a value is, we just put a variable in its place. And in this case, I'm just going to call it Y. Then I'm going to divide this by 2. And it's going to be equal to my midpoint value, which in this case is positive 2. So again, this looks different than what we've normally done for midpoint, because normally we have X1 and X2. In other words, we have the ordered pair for the first point, and then we have the ordered pair for the end point. And we have to figure out the midpoint. But in this one, we don't have that, so we're working backwards. So let's go ahead and do some math. So I'm gonna break these up, but just showing you what's happening. This is gonna tell me my ordered pair for X. This will tell me my ordered pair for Y. So I end up with 1 plus X over 2 is equal to 3. And for this one, because I'm just trying to give myself a little bit more room to work it out, I have 5 plus Y over 2 is equal to 2. And what you have to remember is the first thing that I want to do, for instance, if I'm doing this problem over here on the left first, is I want to get rid of this 2 down in the denominator. The way I get rid of it is I have to undo what's happening. Right now, X is being divided by 2. So 1 plus X is being divided by 2. Well, the opposite of dividing is multiplying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this by 2. And remember, as I'm solving these, anytime that I do one thing to one side of the equation, I have to do it to the other side. So I'm also going to multiply this side by 2. Now, if I do that, these 2's, we like to say that they cancel, because anytime I'm multiplying something by 2, it will cancel out. Anytime I'm multiplying by my denominator, it cancels out the denominator. So since I multiply by 2 and that is my denominator, I'm just simply left with 1 plus X. So I'm going to write that underneath. I got 1 plus X. I'll extend this line a little more. And then 2 times 3, I'm going to multiply it and write it down here. 2 times 3 is 6. So we're almost done. The next step is I want to take this 1 right here and I want to move it over to the right side of the equation. So to move that 1 over to the other side of the equation, I have to do the opposite of a positive 1, which is subtracting 1. So we're using inverse operations. I do need to make sure that I do that on both sides. We'll just extend our line there. 1 minus 1 is 0, so that cancels out. And 6 minus 1 is going to leave me with 5. So therefore, I'm going to bring down X. My X value is equal to 5. So I'm going to write my ordered pair. So right now, when we're talking about the endpoint, endpoint B, we're going to call it point B. And I'll write a B right here. That ordered pair is going to have 5 for my x value. So that first number is going to be 5. And now we just got to find out what is our y value. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to solve this one now. So I'm going to draw a line through my equal sign. And the first thing I want to do is get rid of this 2. So just like on the left side, we're going to have to multiply. So I'm going to multiply by 2 on the left side of the equation. And to keep it balanced, I'll multiply by 2 on the right side of the equation. And so I end up canceling those 2's. And all I'm left with right here is we have 5 plus y is equal to 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Now the next step is we got to get rid of this 5. We need to move it away from the y value. So to move it over to the other side of the equation, I do the opposite of a positive 5, which is to subtract 5. I'll do that on both sides. 5 minus 5 is 0 on the left. And on the right, since this is an integer, right, I'm not going to take a chance at making a mistake on it. I recommend you put it in your calculator. So 4 plus negative 5. And that gives me negative 1. Bring down my y. And so y is equal to negative 1. So my y value for my endpoint is going to be negative 1. And this is my answer to the question. It wanted to know the question. It wanted me to find the endpoint when given one of the endpoints and the midpoint. So right here, we now know what this is. We know that the ordered pair is going to be 5, comma, negative 1. So that's what B is. Now I'm going to show you a way that may look easier, right? This is how we do it mathematically. And for some of you, if you're like, wow, Mr. H, this is really confusing, it looks kind of hard, I still recommend that you do it this way, right? You're in a higher level math class. However, let me make a simplified version of this so you can see what's happening, right? So we can understand in a concrete way what's occurring. Now I'm going to redraw my line segment. So that's point A. I'm going to draw this over here. And we're trying to find point B. And we know our midpoint right here, that's our M, that's our midpoint. So what I want you to imagine is they gave us the A value. They said, now if this is the x-axis, we're going to do 2 different lines. I'm also going to do one that's vertical. So let me go ahead and draw that out before we even start. Let's draw 2 different lines. And we're going to say this is B, what we're looking for. And then this is our midpoint. I'm going to call that M. So what this equation that we did up here, what it does for us is it checks and sees how far did we travel left and right and how far did we travel up and down. Now, our x value, right, this point A was 1, 5. So I'm going to go ahead and just put a 1. I'm going to put my x value on here, right, because A was ordered pair 1, 5. I'm going to write that on top, but I'm just going to put a 1 right here. Now A over here, for this one, I'm going to put that we're currently at 5. And you're going to see why I'm writing these numbers out this way, because I'm going to show how much it moved over. Now our endpoint, the midpoint they gave us, they said for our midpoint was 3 for the x value and 2 for the y value. So imagine this point represents a point on the number line 3. And then M, this is going to be 2. Now the reason I'm drawing this like a number line is because without using the equation, we can actually figure out this problem too. What we really want to find out is how much did it change between the 1 and the 3? Well, I think most of you could probably just know by looking at this, and you would say, well, the number that comes in between a 1 and a 3 is a 2. And so when we changed from A to the midpoint of 3, we moved over 1, 2 spaces. So 1 and 2. So we moved to the right 2 times. Now, if this is a midpoint, it means that it's the middle. So that means that to get to the endpoint, we also have to move the same number of spaces. So to go from A to M, we moved over 2 points. In other words, to go from 1 to 3, we moved to the right 2 times. So if I wanted to figure out what this endpoint is, I could just move 2 times again. So let me go ahead and number this. Let's add some numbers here. We got 4 and we have 5. So if I move over 2 times, so from my midpoint, I go over 1 and then 2. Then that would tell me that this value has to be 5. In other words, B is going to have a 5 for the x value. My x value for that endpoint is going to be 5. Now what I don't know is how far did we move up and down? How far did we move up and down from 5 to 2? And what I hope is, I hope you notice that from 5 to 2, our number got smaller. So from 5 to 2, we had to go down. We didn't move up. So if I want to see how many I moved down to get to 2, I'm going to fill in some numbers. Between 5 and 2, we have 4, and we have 3. So to get to 2, we had to move down 1, 2, 3. So going down 3 means that we subtracted 3. We went down 3. And I just counted how many spots we went down to get to positive 2. So the change between 5 and 2 is a minus 3. So we went down 3, or subtracted 3. Now, if I want to get to my endpoint B, I have to do the same thing. Just as we went down 3 times from 5 to 2, I'd have to go down 3 more times from 2 to whatever number that is. So let me go ahead and go down 3 times. I'm going to add some numbers here. So we're going to go from 2 to 1. And I'm going to do it on this side. So that's down 1. And then I'm going to go down again to 0. So that's down 2 times. And then I'm going to go down again, because we got to go down a total of 3 times. So that'll be negative 1. And that'll be down the 3rd time. So we moved down 3 times, and that put us at negative 1. So I know that my y value has to be equal to negative 1. So negative 1. So there's my answer. So I got 5, negative 1. This time I didn't use a formula at all. I just drew a number line, and I just counted how many times did I move to get to the midpoint. Same thing here. How many times did I move to get to M, the midpoint? And then I just duplicated it and did it all over again. So like this one, we moved down 3 times. I moved down 3 more times. And I know that I ended up at negative 1. Here we went up 2 points. I went to the right 2 values, 2 units. So I just moved it to the right 2 more units to get my x value. So this is 2 different ways that you can use to figure out what the endpoint is when given the midpoint and one of the endpoints. Go ahead, try to do the problem. Call me over if you have any questions.